really wasn't much of anything for an intro. You guys have seen me before, so here I am. Mary asked me to come talk to you guys about patent medicines. We have a number of these on exhibit at the Wight County Museum, and they are kind of sketchy. So I thought we'd talk about some of these today. We've got some imagery. I am going to get to those patent medicines. As the old joke goes, I'm going to take you around Mordor, I'm going to bring you right back here to the Shire, and then we will get through those patent medicines. So, that question right there, are these things medicine, and are they quackery? Hard to say, but I just love this image of this duck. My parents had a friend who was a pharmacist, and I am not kidding you, he looked exactly like this. I love that guy. But as a reminder, I'm from the Wight County Museum over in Smithfield, and we are just right across the water there, so it doesn't take you guys long at all to come on over for a visit. And we are home to the world's oldest peanut. There it is, 1890. We are home to the world's oldest ham. Surely you know the ham. Sometimes he gets some coverage. We have a birthday party for that ham every year. If you're sad and lonely, you can watch him on the ham cam and see what he's doing. I do like to tell visitors when they come in, don't pick your nose or talk badly about your mother-in-law because you might be hurt. But nonetheless, there is our ham, certified by Ripley's, and the ham's a good time. So the first question I want to ask you all, who started the day with a multivitamin? Anybody? A couple of us? All right, so does it work? We don't know, but it can't hurt. Although, for some of these things that I'm about to show you, everyone might have been saying the same thing, I'm not sure. So here is a short history of medicine. I'm going to start you off with that. I'm going to let you read that. Go. There are the giggles. You know, it all comes full circle. It all comes back to, you know, where we started. And I'm gonna take you around that circle today. So first, I thought it would be good if we talked a little bit about the history of medicine. So obviously, we've all gotten, humanity's become a lot smarter over the years, but it all started, of course, with primitive medicine, and everybody was discovering in the beginning which plants were edible, and whether or not these edible plants would help you in times of illness. So certainly we're still using a little bit of herbal medicine today. Oops, I went a little bit far there, going back to our primitive medicine. But aspirin, of course, comes from the willow tree, and then if you have a headache, you might be reaching for that aspirin. And foxglove digitalis, so for folks with heart issues, that might be something that is still necessary, especially I guess with some of the heart issues that you just announced. So going forward to the ancient Egyptians, like prehistoric man, there was a lot of things that were based on myth and legend. They did know a little bit more about the human body. Of course, mummification. They knew a little bit about things that were going on there. And wait, why is that going forward? Okay, nonetheless. All right, hang on. All right, my computer is just being funny. But they did believe that a lot of times that if there was no reason that they could figure out for an illness, they thought perhaps it had something to do with, spiritual beings, that kind of thing. But we go forward into the Middle East, and there were some ancient Babylonian texts that date back to the 2nd century, the 2nd millennium. And they actually, like the Egyptians, believed a lot in the practice of diagnosis, and they were the first folks who came along with prognosis and that sort of thing. As we go, I think it's set on timer, and that's what the problem is. Well, nonetheless, there might be a lot of flipping through this, guys. So there we go. All right, so we have Indian medicine as we go forward, but that's usually considered the oldest medical system, surfacing more than 10,000 years ago. And they used a lot of herbs to treat a lot of ailments, and you guys may have heard of Ayurvedic medicine. Sometimes if you head on over to the natural section of the store, you can find some things. But they also believed that things that were causing illness in humans, it was usually one of three things. It was usually spirit, phlegm, and bile that was causing the issue. So they would kind of, advance that theory and try to find things that would mitigate some of those. If one of if perhaps your phlegm was too high, they would want to find some sort of treatment that would dial down the phlegm in your system. So there is our India. We're going forward now to China. About 186 BC, there It was the earliest Chinese medical text, and it was still a little bit primitive, of course, but they were doing, of course, herbal medicines, chanting. They talked a little bit about lancing issues, and that sort of thing. And everybody knows who that is, right? Did you all? That's Hippocrates. Did everybody have their coffee this morning? Okay. Yeah, once I said Hippocrates, you were like, oh yeah, I knew that. Okay. So, okay, I think it's set to timer. If it would, wait, hang on. I wonder if I set that to minute timer. Yeah, I'm not that smart. It'll be okay, guys, I promise. So, there we go. There's Hippocrates. He was the most famous of all Greek doctors, and we've all heard the whole, do no harm coming from Hippocrates. He really tried to embrace finding out with humans why, what the natural explanation is for why someone became ill. When we go forward to those ancient Romans, they, again, like the Greeks, like the Egyptians, placed a lot of emphasis. It was really hard for me to not say emphasis. I say that when I'm being difficult. On being healthy. So they devoted a lot of time, there we go. Devoted a lot of time to working out. They worked out in the nude, right? But there was a lot of time devoted to being healthy, working out, and staying strong, lifting heavy things. They did a lot of fun things. But they believed that if you kept fit, then you would remain healthy. And of course, here we have a Roman bath. Being clean together with others was a big thing. So, moving forward into the Middle Ages, by the 14th century, there were some universities devoted to medical study, and so students could go and they would study under a master physician. Of course, also at this time, the Roman Catholic Church was still pretty big, and if whatever was going on, if the Roman Catholic Church didn't believe on what the medical folks were saying, they would say, this person was sick because of God, and you could not go against the Roman Catholic Church because that would be heresy and there would be punishments. But there's also, just as a random, I don't know if you guys have seen, the new Leonardo da Vinci movie that just came out, The Inventor. That came out, and anyway, it's animated. It's kind of like a whole stopgap animation thing, harkening back to the Rudolph that we sit through every year because it's tradition. But it was a fascinating movie. Went to see it on Monday because I didn't go to work. It was great. And but anyway, there's a big discussion in there with Leonardo, having to steal corpses because he did do a lot of autopsies and dissection, so he could learn more about the human body. And so there's a big misconception, I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent, that dissections were not a thing in the Middle Ages, but they actually were. And of course, in the process, folks were learning a little bit more about the human body. Anyway, go see The Inventor. I enjoyed it. So, moving right along, medicine still in the Middle Ages. Here we go. Remedies were still kind of crude at this time, based on herbs and potions and drastic cures, that kind of thing. But they were also influenced by astrology. So, depending on what sign you were born under, your cure at that time might have a little bit more to do with when you were born. Surgeons, right? That kind of came along around the 16th, 17th century, and they were it was a limited branch of medicine, and they were really regarded as, it was a lowly craft, because they had sharp instruments and tools, and of course, if you needed someone with sharp instruments and tools, chances are you were going in to get a haircut. So really, surgeons and barbers kind of hung out together, but of course, the most frequent use of the surgeon was for bloodletting. So if you needed to open up a vein for some reason, perhaps it was thought that you had too much blood, you could go to a surgeon who would perform that very lovely task. If you were wealthy and you only needed to have a little bit of blood, then you could get a leech, but leeches cost money. So surgeons apparently were cheap back then. So things started to change once the 16th century rolls around. We've got the advent of artillery and weapons, that kind of thing, because that's really changing the nature of wounds on the battlefield, and that's requiring a little bit more, technical expertise from surgeons. So here we have the Civil War that comes along, and of course we all know that more soldiers died of disease during this time period than in battle, and there were a lot of things going on, chicken pox, measles, dysentery, diarrhea, all malaria, all kinds of things. So there was no antibiotics right at this time, and so most of the time if you were ill, you would have been prescribed, quinine, coffee, alcohol, that sort of thing. So, yay. All right, there will be a quiz later. Here are some microbes and their discoverers, typhoid and cholera. Typhoid, they figured that out, that it was, a thing in the 1880s, and polio, of course, right down to 1949. So, you got all that? You ready for the quiz later? Moving on to World War I, it really acted as a stimulus for medical progress, but actually war does that. War encourages folks to go ahead and figure out what you can do for patching folks up or curing them. There was expanded technology during this time. X-ray machines were improved. The electron microscope came along, and of course they brought about the discovery of insulin. And insulin comes from pigs, right? That's another thing I could go on for quite some time. Look at me going off on the second tangent of this lecture. Pigs are actually what is referred to as a translational animal, meaning pigs are most similar to the human body, more so than any other animal, which is weird for us to think about. So that's why our insulin and a number of other things are coming from pigs. And just last week in the news, I believe there was the pig kidney was put into a human, and it was there for 2 years. The patient expired after 2 years, but they, I believe they pulled it out. But they can use, all kinds of things from pigs to place them into humans. Heart valves have been transferred for quite some time. Just down, and recently also lungs. Lungs can go into small children. So, okay. All right, there will probably be another tangent before this is over, so stay with me. All right, moving right along. Now we've got some more microbes. Oh wait, I did the microbes. We're going forward. Sorry, there we go. All right, there is our World War I. And now, who's this? That is not Hippocrates. That's right. That's Alexander Fleming. So 1928, discovery of antibiotics, discovery of penicillin. And as the story goes, and honestly, I don't really know that this is totally the truth, but apparently he was not very well, he was kind of a slob. And so I guess he had some of his petri dishes that were kind of pushed into the back, and that's, I guess, he just kind of forgot to clean them, and then penicillin grew, and then all of a sudden we had an antibiotic. I am pretty sure that there's a little bit more to that story. But, of course, it could kill other bacteria, and of course by D-Day, by the time D-Day rolls around, penicillin was readily available to treat soldiers. So there we go. There's some more dates. That's small, you can't read it. But the first flu vaccine, 1945, first polio vaccine, 1952, all the way down to 1967 with that first heart human transplant, which did not come from pig. So there we go. So we've got some more dates. The smallpox eradicated by 1980, and the first vaccine for rubella there in 1970. But I threw in Dahlia's shape, 96, just because. So of course today, 21st century medicine, is very scientific, lots of advanced research, and so there we go. So we just went through the history of health very quickly. So now let's go into some weird discussions of medicine and treatment throughout the years. And then that's going to get us to our patent medicines, I promise you. So here we go, cures through the ages. Let's start with this one. Do you have a headache? I don't know. But trepanation, this is actually the earliest surgical operation in human history. And prehistoric times, a lot of times it was used to treat someone if they had a brain injury and they felt pressure there, or if they were diagnosed as someone who had some spirits in their system that needed to be removed, or if indeed they were mentally ill. But it is from that skull picture that you can see up there, it is actually literally giving someone a hole in the head. Approximately 50% of patients survived. So there you go. There's some ancient Egyptian mummies that you've seen them, that they have survived. So here are some other, from our good friend Pliny the Elder. We have some sneezing. If you have heaviness in the head, you might need a feather. But also, if you touch the nostrils of a mule with your lips, this will arrest your sneezing and hiccups. Thanks. That's right. I don't know. So if you might want to check with your dentist on this one, but also our good friend Pliny. If you rinse your teeth 3 times a year with the blood of a tortoise, then you will not have a toothache. Maybe, I don't know. Or you could just brush your teeth. So there's a little bit on anesthetic. So there was a 13th century Egyptian manuscript with the first detailed description of an anesthetic. And it is actually said that these things have been around a little bit longer, but the 13th century is as early as we can trace it back to. The plague. So, rats, fleas. But the 1300s outbreak, there were a number of different treatments. Rotten treacle, little sticky substance there, given to sick patients. But it had to be at least 10 years old, and it, had to be, in order to be effective, it had to be old treacle. Which honestly, we probably all have molasses in our cabinet that's that old. But when it is that old, there's usually a little bit of sense to this, because there would be a couple of microbes and disease-fighting bacteria in there that would kind of have matured in the syrup over the time. So maybe. Urine, however, probably not so much. But if you needed to cure your plague, you could be given a bath with the dose of some urine from someone who did not have the plague, and but they said it was also actually better if you would actually drink the urine. So yay. Also, if you were wealthy, you could take some emeralds and you could kind of grind them up, and then you would have a powder, and then you could swallow it. So hopefully you really did a good job with the grinding of that. A little bit more logical, but not effective, was actually candied horseradish. So if you guys have ever had, a big old spoonful of horseradish, mistakenly thinking that it was sour cream when it was not, I don't speak from personal experience at all, you know that stuff's pretty potent. But if anybody's familiar, there's a fellow on YouTube by the name of Max Miller. Max Miller does a weekly, tasting food through history kind of segment, and he's really fascinating. I've been obsessed with this guy since he launched during COVID. But he did a plague episode, and he did do candied horseradish. So 2 years ago, I had a program for Parks and Rec kids, and I made them some candied horseradish. And I'm here to tell you that when you boil it and then you candy it, it takes the punch out of the horseradish, and it's not so bad. But I also am here to tell you that I haven't gotten the plague, and neither have any of those children. So you do your own math with that. So anyway, it's kind of fun to make. It's not that challenging. If you want to give it a whirl, you should. Go get some horseradish. All right, so bloodletting. This was a popular treatment for a lot of diseases, and a lot of diseases were thought to be caused if you had too much blood in the body. Then you could just let some out, and then you would cure the disease. But when, of course, that large quantity of blood was needing to be let go, then you would have to call in the surgeon rather than the leech. So syphilis, right? Early treatments for syphilis included mercury. Well, that's not good at all. That's not good at all for bodies. But it has terrible side effects: kidney failure, severe mouth sores, and loss of teeth. But if you get those tortoises, maybe you'll be all right. So, and then of course the old saying, a night with Venus and then a lifetime with Mercury. So this was also another interesting cure for syphilis. If in the early 1900s, you might be intentionally infected with malaria to cure the syphilis. And so really it was thought that by infecting you with malaria, that would raise your fever so high that it would kill off the syphilis in your body. And this is sad that I'm going to make this statement, but only 15% of patients died. So anyway, and they say that actually it did show some marked progress for a number of patients who had the infection. Here we go. If you can't hear very well, you should go get yourself a hedgehog, flay him and roast him, and then let someone put the grease or the fat that comes from the hedgehog into your ear, and then you will recover your hearing. That was from 1656. Here we have an ad for coffee in 1657, and actually that's not so scary, right? So feel free to get your coffee because that'll cure a lot of things, right? All right, stop eating. If you're troubled with stomach worms, you need to hold some honeycomb in front of your mouth, and then the worms will come out to enjoy the honey. 1659. I know. I forgot to warn you, there will be some gross things. We're almost done with gross and gross. So, if you have an infant at home who's teething, you should go rub those teeth with the brains of a hare, and then that way their teeth will cut easily. 1659. Poor kid. Yeah. So, talking about Erasmus Darwin. That was Darwin's grandfather, and he was a physician and a scientist, and a bit of a philosopher, but he believed that disease could be cured with sleep. And so if you work well, go get yourself some sleep. And the best way to do some sleeping is rotational therapy. So you can kind of see this little contraption over here. So the patient would be spun around, and then they'd be sleepy, and then they'd be all right after that. Dr. Benjamin Rush, signer of the Declaration of Independence, he kind of subscribed to this, but he also believed that mental illness was brought about by brain congestion, and so that this rotational therapy would help to cure the mental disorder. So if you want to spin around a little bit, it'll make you sleepy, and then you'll feel better, maybe. So let's rush over there in the center. If you're not eating well, go get yourself some sulfuric acid, right? 1824, how horrifying is that? That's awful. To nourish your hair, if your hair needs some nourishment, you can apply some beef marrow to it, right? We've got a little ad here from 1832, and then a random photo I found on the internet. But going back to the whole pig thing, here we go, tangent number 3. I'll go back to that. A lot of our health and beauty products, actually a lot of products. When I talk about pigs, I like to tell everyone there's no such thing as a vegetarian. Because they actually do use everything but the squeal, and so a lot of those pig byproducts are in a lot of products that you use every day. And so if you go into your bathroom, if you put conditioner and shampoo in your hair, and had any multivitamins and like a little gelatin cap, there you go. So the point is that the bone marrow is coming from an animal. In this case, we've got a little cow going on, but pig as well, and the fat from that product may actually help your hair, because you washed your hair with it this morning. Oh, there we go. Do you have the ague? That's malaria. And so if you've got the ague, you should take yourself a little spider that's alive, roll them up in a cobweb, put them in some butter, and then eat it. And then you won't have the malaria anymore, right? And I just threw in this one because it's so weird. So this is in the early 19th century. This was a cutting-edge treatment for rheumatism in Australia. So along the southern coast of Australia, if there was the rotting carcass of a whale, if you sat, there we go. If you sat in this dead whale for 30 hours, then you would be cured of joint aches. You just got to hang out in the dead whale. I don't think there's Wi-Fi there, so bring some books. Anyway, so there we go. Little hydrotherapy here. Hydrotherapy in the early 20th century. Folks were using a variety of water treatments to help cure things. Some were harmless, and some were kind of Cheney-esque waterboarding kind of things. And so that was also, again, a treatment for mental illness. And then, of course, I had to mention lobotomy. That was actually introduced by a neurosurgeon in 1949. He actually won the Nobel Prize. And then things got a little sketchy after that. This is Walter Freeman here. He had his lobotomobile, kind of like the Wienermobile that he drove around, and he could give you a lobotomy if you need it. And so, you're just basically kind of severing that prefrontal cortex that went in through the eyeball. And a lot of times, for some folks, it was, mental illness, if you needed a personality change, that kind of thing. For some folks, it was effective. For the bulk of them, it was not. But they figured out when psychotropic drugs came along, hey, we don't need to do this anymore. But it got a little sketchy, a little scary. A lot of patients were not cured. But Rosemary Kennedy, of course, she had the lobotomy. So, all right, finally, I told you we would get to the patent medicines. So here we go. And I did bring a number of them from the museum today so that you can check them out later on. I would recommend not touching them. I don't touch them. Just if you want to touch it and pick it up, I've got some gloves up there. So they have residue, and as you can see from the ones that we've got, some of them still have stuff inside of them. So anyway, I'm just warning you. So patent medicine, the term itself really, these products were coming to us in the 18th and 19th century, and they were, colorfully named. They had colorful claims. and they were supposed to be registered with the Patent and Trademark Office in order for people to hawk their wares. And for the most part, they weren't. So, so these were just things put into bottles with some crazy labels, and folks were making some money off of them in the name of health. And a lot of times, of course, they had some yucky stuff in them: opium, morphine, alcohol, strychnine. I got one of those up there. And they were not prescribed by physicians. They were prescribed by someone who made this wonderful claim to you. And who would make those claims? Probably one of those fellows right there. Modern advertising was born during this period. So, lots of almanacs and newspapers. And so a lot of times in the back you would see these ads for these products that would help you to, cure everything. But of course, if the traveling medicine man came to your town, he might come along with some jugglers, maybe some animals, some music, some comedy, to be able to kind of make, a little platform for the selling of his products to make it a little bit more exciting. So, and why was it so popular in the 19th century? There weren't really a lot of physicians, and a lot of folks weren't terribly educated. So treatments were still sometimes based on the balancing of those humors, but bleeding, cold baths, that kind of stuff. So it really was the golden age of quackery. And of course, during the Revolution, those British patent medicines kind of lost their dominance because they weren't able to be imported. And the homegrown brands had to step up to the plate to be able to supply the needs so you could cure things. So, and again, once you throw in the mass marketing, you've got basically the time period is right for the hawking of these products. And this was actually going on throughout the world as well. So, what are some of these medicines that I have brought here with me today that hopefully you do not have in your cabinet? Well, we actually have snake oil in our collection, which is actually, I think, one of my favorite products. Not for use, of course, but it does, you will note, I put up some of the ingredients here, it contains no snake. There's no snake. But you've got your beef fat in there, you've got your mineral oil, and you've got your red pepper, your capsaicin. And so what does that do? That's gonna, if you're drinking it, it's gonna make it taste really, it's gonna make it taste like medicine. It's gonna give you that punch. And but it's also got turpentine in it. So yeah, that's not so good. So here is some King's Discovery. And this was brought to us, right, in 1869, and it was used to treat TB. But hey, look at that first ingredient, it's opium. Got some chloroform in there, got some ipecac, if you're feeling like you need to throw up, oil of pine tar, but at least there's wild cherry in there. Maybe that will make it taste not so awful. And traces of capsaicin, so that spicy pepper again. Here we have our Wampol's preparation. Actually, I don't think I brought this one, but it has been around since 1880, and if you need to feel better or increase your appetite, you can have some of this, and it's got the strychnine and the alcohol in it. So also, if you've got some rats around that you'd like to get rid of, maybe that's what you need. Maybe. This is gross, tasteless chill tonic. And reportedly, it did have a taste, so some false marketing right there. But yeah, 1878, and the quinine, quinine to help cure or prevent malaria, coming from the bark of that South American tree, the cinchona, reportedly didn't taste so good. So the tasteless chill tonic, to take away some of those fevers, those chills. Had a little bit of flavor to it, and maybe it would be, a little lemony and a little less awful, perhaps. But yeah, quinine was the only thing possible for the treatment of malaria until the 40s. Here we have some McElderry's Cardouille, which is kind of funny and strange to say, but it was marketed to women. The name comes from a type of thistle. The product does contain thistle, but for all those feminine complaints, in the 1920s, you could pick up this, only 19% alcohol. Only. How about some swamp root? 1878, developed for gout as a sanitarium, and it's got actually, it's just the turpentine and the alcohol that's not so good in there, right? That's not so horrible. We've seen worse. We've got this antiseptic oil up until 1934. Apparently he wasn't labeling it very well, and he was found guilty of mislabeling his product, and he was fined $25. I'm certain he probably paid it and then continued to market it. Do you need some cough syrup? It's just got the Ipecac in there, that's all. That's all. Nobody likes cough syrup. We have some favorite prescription of Dr. Pierce from 1859, again for female complaints, but it's got the valerian and the opium in there. Yeah, that'll get rid of the complaints, right? Bromide compounds. If you've done any archaeology, a lot of times at historic sites, these little tiny blue bottles will pop up. I've got one up there. That one's actually not legit, so you couldn't touch that one, but it's just a blue bottle. These were used usually for the treatment of seizures, and blue bottles is usually what they came in, and it's toxic, so not so good for use. Here we have a product with some arsenic in it. This is actually not one of ours, but I just wanted to mention the fact that arsenic was one of the oldest medicines that dates back to ancient times. But of course, very unpleasant for folks. But there were all kinds of ways to use arsenic, tablets and tinctures and balms and that kind of thing. So, but they were using this to treat usually syphilis. Also, had to throw this one in there. We tend to think of energy drinks as something that you can get at the grocery store, usually when you're standing in line to finish your checkout. And those things have tons of caffeine, a little bit of taurine in them, which you can also find in cat food. But of course, Radiothor was an energy drink, but not something that you would want to consume. Of course, we've got something in there with radiation, and it was just basically radium dissolved in water. So if you need a pick-me-up, that is not your answer, right? All right, lots of interesting advertisements at this time. Again, there's more radioactive water. Maybe you need some hairdressing, maybe. That's some horrible stuff. If you've been up to the Valentine in Richmond, meat juice was a thing. Does anybody know the story of meat juice? Yeah. So there was a doctor, and his wife was ill, so he basically got some meat and kind of squished out what he thought were all the nutrients, bottled it into this meat juice, and then it made her well. And then he began to market it. So it actually became really one of the most popular patent meds, usually at the end of the 1800s. So there was meat juice everywhere. To me, it kind of sounds like stock or broth. But nonetheless, it was a big deal. This has also been 3D scanned, so if you head on over to Sketchfab and you're like, hey, I'd like to see what that meat juice bottle looks like, if you don't happen to have a bottle of meat juice at home, then you can go to Sketchfab and see what that looks like. Here is a 1912 ad promising all kinds of things right there. A few more. You can wash away fat and years of age with some soap or fix some hair. Right? All right, and wanted to mention this one. This tonic was invented in 1863. It was advertised as a wine, as a general cure-all product for anything that ailed you, and it was endorsed by a lot of folks, including Thomas Edison. But the reason for its success, it had cocaine in it. And so it was definitely a pick-me-up, and of course we all know the story of Coca-Cola and what was in that originally. So, lots of cocaine. But that kind of kicked off the invention of Coke. And so there was a kind of the inspiration in the beginning. So back to those traveling medicine men, they were quacks, right? And that word has an interesting derivation. Essentially means the hawker of salves, because they were. And in the Middle Ages, the word meant to shout. So quacksalvers sold their wares in the market with their little loud shouting voice. So my question to you is, do we see the legacy of traveling medicine shows today? Sure we do. Sure we do. You guys have all thought about that Ginsu knife. I know you have. You're like, come on, buy me that Ginsu knife. But a number of people accused of quackery over the years, Ron Hubbard, Scientology, Harvey Kellogg, Battle Creek, Michigan, he had a sanitarium up there, so folks could go. He was very much an advocate of, vegetarian lifestyle. But of course, if you have cornflakes in your cabinet, you can thank John Harvey Kellogg for that. Coming down to Louis Pasteur was accused of quackery, and of course he is known for his breakthrough with pasteurization and microbiology and the first rabies vaccine, and also Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling said, you know, you can cure all your diseases if you just use vitamin C, and now we say that's not true. But we do have in the collection this from Battle Creek, Michigan, and it's lactodextrin. And it's essentially, you know, kind of a food supplement. Essentially, it's, you know, the shakes that you feed to folks when they're, you know, usually eating a little extra calorie or in the nursing home, so we do have that. Also wanted to mention, lots of places, especially in the early 1900s, you could go to, you could take yourself a little vacation, even if it wasn't to a sanitarium. You could go to a local resort, relax, enjoy the waters. Days Point Hotel was located in Isle of Wight County, and it was a popular place to go to on the water on Morrill Bay. But they advertised that they had healing waters there, and they sold it, they bottled it, and you know, you could go and frolic in the water, consume the water, and then become more healthy. And if you see over there on the left, the slide didn't turn out well, but they actually had their water analyzed in the early 1900s. So I took that analysis when we discovered this piece to the reverse osmosis plant in the town of Smithfield, and I said, hey, what do you think of this water composition? And he looked at it and he's like, that's what it is now. So whatever, take that all with a grain of salt. But where could you get these healing waters and these potions and whatnot? Of course, you could go to your local soda fountain, you could go to your local drugstore to purchase these things if the hawker of salve was not coming to your neighborhood. You know, if you went to the drugstore, you might be able to get yourself a little Coke or a little Pepsi. Which came first? Which one? Coke. Yeah, Coke came first by about 3 years. So 1886 for Coke and 1893 for Pepsi. That's not 3 years at all. Well, you do the math. It's fine. So we do have in our collection this fountain over here on the right, where you would put the syrup into the glass, and then you would get a spoon, and then you would add the seltzer. You'd have to mix it up yourself. And some folks out there actually at a local pharmacy that is no longer there in downtown Smithfield. Looks to me like they're having ice cream, but we're just going to, for the sake of this presentation, say that they were having Cokes. So another pharmacy in Smithfield, and we do have a number of their products in our collection. Actually, tangent number 4, Little's, somebody else owns the building now. They were doing a little clean out, and they brought us some things, and they said, we've got some stuff, we've got some old advertisements and bottles that we found in a wall. Do you want it? And we said, well, of course we want it. So the guy, so the curator went down to go get the stuff out of the wall, put it in a box, and he pulls out this dead rat. He's like, well, do you want the mummified rat? And she said, no, we do not want the mummified rat. You gotta have standards when you're in the museum business, right? So, when did things change? Things changed 1906. The Pure Food and Drug Act comes along, passed by Congress. So really, it was at this time Congress was like, well, from now on, we really need to make sure that we are labeling these things properly so that folks are not consuming things that will make them ill. Also around this time, The Jungle was published in 1905, Upton Sinclair's exposure of horrors in the meat industry. So the Food and Drug and the USDA kind of came along in this time and realized that we need to make sure that we're doing a lot to keep our folks healthy and not forcing things on them that will make them ill. So it all kind of coincided I'll save that one for later. But also I wanted to throw this one in there, everybody's favorite Christmas presentation, right? Emmett Otter and his jug band Christmas. Emmett Otter, his father was actually a snake oil salesman, but as Emmett says, his father didn't do well because there ain't enough people who want to oil a snake. Poor Emmett. So, all kinds of things in the news that kind of bring us back around to where we started. This one came out about 3 years ago, but they discovered this ancient Anglo-Saxon potion for eye infections. And there was onion, there was like 2 different variations of onion in it, and then they had to use the bile from a cow's stomach to be able to concoct this thing. And then they discovered that when they actually did it, it did do something to combat MRSA. So, who knows, right? And also, I'm throwing this out there because there may be some people here who are stamp collectors, and perhaps those people came along and said, hey, can you mention stamps? So, hey Albert, would you like to talk about the stamps?
The one in the middle is a patent medicine stamp. They were not issued by government, but they were issued, well, federal government, but local governments, basically to tax patent medicine. And so you had to pay for the stamp. And so when it was sold, the person could know that it was sort of officially sanctioned by the government, at least the person paid the tax. And so that's what that is a tax stamp, the one in the middle. Got George on it.
Got George on it, that's right. So he paid his tax for this stamp, but it still might have had strychnine and something horrible in it, right? But coming back to today and things that we think work, but then maybe they don't. You may have seen that just came out in the news last week. Now the FDA says decongestant in cold medicines doesn't work at all. So, you know. So maybe Sudafed and NyQuil are now going to end up on the patent medicine table. But that, of course, brings us back to the history of medicine, as I told you it would. Right on back to here, go eat this root. So thank you so much. If you had a good time, I'm glad that you came. If you had a terrible time, you can talk to Albert. So there you go. Thanks so much for coming, guys. I appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.